Good morning. Today's daf is daf Gimel, and we are up to the two dots, 15 lines from the top of the page. And the Mishnah was telling us that if you did a carbon shaloi lishma, if you shechted a carbon lishma, the carbon is still an active carbon. Just the bailim, the owners weren't yet to their promise, and they have to bring it up again. But exception is a carbon chatas and a carbon pesach. If you did not bring it lishma, then the carbon chatas and the carbon pesach is rude. Comes along Rab in this Gemara today and is going to limit that which we say that a carbon chatas, if you brought it up for the wrong reason, shaloi lishma, the carbon chatas is possible. It depends what the loy lishma is. What exactly did you have in mind? So Rabbi of Gimel Amad Aleph, about 15 lines from the top of the page. Says the Gemara, and remember yesterday we learned that Ravina said to Rav Papa, "It's a pity you weren't last night when you weren't here Shabbos. You were outside the Tchum when Rava asked some brilliant questions and he gave some brilliant answers. We discussed yesterday one of them, and now we talk about Lishma, and now we're going to talk about another one. Yesterday was about Stomon, whether Stomon Lishma. We point out the difference between a get and kachim. And by kachim, we say that stamon lishma. If you had nothing in mind, is lishma. Comes on the Gemara. Su Rami Milsachlita. Another question was asked. Me Omar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. We'll learn later in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda saying Rav. This that the Mishnah said that if you brought a chatas shaloi lishma, the chatas is disqualified now. It depends what loy lishma is. What do you mean? Chatas is shachta l'shem oila. If you take chatas and you had in mind a carbon oila, different carbon, it undermines the chatas. It's possible. Or the shachta l'shem chulin, which is totally outside of the realm of a carbon shayla, is kosher. What's the logic? So Rava thought there's a logic behind it. Alma de mina, if it's similar but it's different, then it can ruin it. Machriba. The lav mina, if it's not similar, then like machriba, it has no shlita, it has no control, it has no impact on the thing. Chulin is nothing to do with the world of kosher, different world, so it has no effect on it. So if you had a chatas and you had in mind that this animal should be chulin, doesn't passel it. But if you had in mind a kachim, but the wrong one, then it passes it. Okay, so this is the rule. Mina is machriv, loy mina, loy machriv. So we're going to ask a question. First of all, by Gittin. So the mina, well, that's the same similar idea by Gittin we had before. Any get that was not written for the sake of a woman is possible. If you didn't have this particular woman in mind, possible. It sounds like no matter which woman you had in mind, if it wasn't this one, it's possible. Now, l'chayda, mina would be a Yiddish woman, and lav mina would be a goy. Because we know a goy can't be a shlech because it's not shaykh to the whole union. We even have an eved. It's not shaykh to the whole union of gittin v'kedushin. And yet it seems from here that if you had in mind a goyish woman, not this particular woman, it possibly get. L'chayda, according to Rav's rule, if it's lav mina, it has no bearing on what's happening. If you had in mind another woman, a Yiddish woman who's shaykh to the union of gittin, okay, I understand it ruins the get. But if you had in mind an avedis kachavim was not shaykh to the whole union of gittin, why should the get be possible? But I mean, ask a question. Any woman, if you had in mind a non-Jewish woman, Vishani, so why? And Vishani and Rav answered. You know why? He answered very simple. If you did something which is totally outside of what you're doing right now, and those lav mina, it's as if it's non-existent. And by a get, if it's non-existence, what did you have in mind? Nothing, right? Stop. You had nothing in mind. As if it's non-existence. You had nothing in mind. But we just established yesterday by a get, you have to have lishma. So therefore, it's no good. But when it comes to a carbon chatas, okay, you had in mind chulin. It's like non-existent. But we said before, stomon is lishma. So therefore, it's kosher. So Gemara says, by get, we're in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. Rabbi Yehuda Marav came along and established a new rule, and he said that when we say if you shechted a carbon chatas and you had the wrong carbon in mind, is only if you had a wrong carbon. Then it ruined the carbon chatas. But if you had in mind as if it's an ordinary animal, it wasn't a carbon at all, it was just chulin, then it does not ruin the chatas because it's totally outside the realm. And he calls it lav mina. It's outside the realm, and therefore it has no impact. And so we're going to ask a few questions. We just asked about a get, then we answered that by a get, imagine the Goyish woman is you didn't have in mind, habla stomach. You had nothing in mind. And stomach puzzle by a get, nothing in mind is no good. You have to have a woman in mind. It has to be lishma. as we learned yesterday. But kachim, when it comes to kachim, let's say you were shechting a chatas and you had in mind to be an ordinary carbon. Dal chulim menai, you remove as if it's non-existent. So what do you have? Have nothing in mind. Stam. Havle stomach. And we learned yesterday, stomach shadim. Okay. So now we're going to ask a question on Rav. This principle that Rav said, the way Rav understood Rav, it's a logic to it, that if it's something outside the realm and has no bearing, I'll ask you a question, the following. Did Rav to say never have but if you shechted the Ksheida, if you shechted the Karmachat had in mind it was chulin, since it's totally outside the realm is kosher, almos. In other words, again, we're repeating. I'm not sure exactly why the Gemara has to repeat the same thing we just did a line ago. Didn't mean a machriba. If it's similar, it will ruin it, but it's different, so it ruins it. So you had in mind you were shechting chat, you had in mind in oil, it ruins the chatas. But the loy mina loy machriba. But if you had chulin in mind, doesn't ruin it. So let me ask you a question regarding the laws of tumah. You know that by tumah you touch a keli, the keli becomes a shedes touches a keli, the keli becomes tummy. How does a normal keli become tummy? From the outside, megaboy. A clay chedes, like a clay chedes, an earthenware, is unique, and there the din is it does not become tummy from the outside; it becomes tummy from the inside. So if you have, even though it's only in the avi, if you have a suspended sheretz inside a keli, then all the food inside that keli becomes tummy, even though the sheretz is not touching it. So now the pasuk says that everything in a clay cheres, everything inside it becomes tummy. It says el toichoy, and we darshan because as the Gemara will see at the end of the Gemara, the extra vav could have said toich. By saying toichoy to say dafke inside the keli, but if it's inside another keli inside this keli, it's not become tummy. In other words, if you have, let's say, a big keli, or let's say an oven that is tummy, and then you have a keli inside there where the keli is protruding from the oven. So in other words, if the keli is lower than the height of the oven, then obviously the tumah comes in through the avir. But the keli itself, the walls of the keli is protruding, but the bulk of the keli is sitting inside the oven, and there's food inside that keli. Does that food inside the keli become tummy? Because it's sitting inside, it's resting inside a tummy oven. So we say toichoy, only if it's inside the oven itself, but not if it's inside something else which is inside the oven. Okay, that's what we learned from there. What does that have to do with what we're talking about over here? So we learned even if it's not earthenware, let's say just a keli like you rinse, a metal keli. A metal keli sitting inside the oven, a totally different realm, and yet it has an impact. It protects what's inside there. So don't we see from here that even lav mina has a bearing? You said if it's lav mina, it's as if non-existent, as if it doesn't exist. It's right here. It's a different keli altogether, a different material, and it prevents the tumah from coming in. But I feel not only for being clay chered, but I feel clay shetev matzil. B'shani, and he answered. And the answer follows. His answer is, I'm not sure why the Iker answer is not in the Gemara. The Iker answer is, a clay shetev is, yes, the same realm. Who said the same realm means it has to be exactly the same? Here it's very similar. They're both kelim. This is a keli to put things inside there, and this is a keli you put things inside there. So therefore, it's the same realm, and a clay shetev sitting inside an oven and the walls are outside, it protects the food. When doesn't it protect the food? We'll see in a minute. Shani answered, and therefore he says, so what are you going to compare in this situation of an oven? Chulin, you're saying chulin is so distant from kachim that it's non-existent. What would be an example of that inside the oven? What would be an example of that inside the oven that is so removed that it wouldn't prevent the tumah from coming with food? No, but even if you have this sticking out of the oven and there's food inside it, it'll become tummy. You know where? Chulin eitzel kachim. That contrast. Imagine there's a dividing wall by an oven. It's not a keli, a wall. Yeah, inside the oven, you have a split. It's not a keli because it's just a wall. There, it doesn't prevent the tumah from the oven coming in. Even though this wall might be sticking out of the oven, it doesn't matter because it's a totally different realm, as if it's non-existent. The same comparison, chulin to kachim. Chulin also as if non-existent. But lemahanya means there's no impact. And how do I know that? How do you know that there's a mechitza there? The food becomes tummy on the other side of the mechitza. It's not. It's my favorite Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, Tanush b'nesadim ibidi is you put a wall there between a piece of wood or let's say a curtain. The nimtza sheretz b'mokamecha, the sheretz on one side of it, hakol tummy. It doesn't prevent the tummy from going in the avir. It's there because it's as if non-existent. Why non-existent? Because not a keli. This wall's not a keli. Kavedes, which normally we translate as a beehive, shepchusa. Okay, this kavedes is a keli, but it was broken. It was broken. So the moment a keli is broken, it loses its status as a keli. And then pukuka bekash. Then you filled it up with straw. No, but you didn't permanently seal it. So it's not. It didn't retain its keli shop. It's now a broken keli, as if it's not a keli anymore. It's a totally different realm. And this keli is suspended in the avir of the tanner, so sticking out and is shedded. But if the shed is inside the kaveres, the whole tanner becomes tamei. Why? It's inside a keli, or shedes betanner, the shed's in the oven. Why? Because it's not a keli, so it's non-existent. Non-existent. There's nothing to prevent the tumah from going to the keli. That's the example of chulin and kachim. Okay, perfect. So Rav goes going to Chamim. However, we would like to have Rav going with everybody, and there we have a problem because Rabbi Lezer says takatoy. Rabbi Lezer holds that no, that it does hold back. I mean, according to Rabbi Lezer, then chulin, if you had in mind by karma chatas chulin, it should pass it, even though it's lav mina, because he doesn't hold this word of lav mina. He holds that even though you have a mechitza, whatever it is, the tumah is prevented from going across. It's lav mina, doesn't disturb him. Says the Gemara, and Rabbi Lezer gives a svar. He said, I have a kal v'chomer. What's my kal v'chomer? Im hitzel b'meis hachomer, you have an oil. And we know in an oil, the tumah spreads throughout. You have a kazayas of a mace or a vias of blood. The tumah of the corpse spreads throughout the thing. But if you have a mechitza there, and you're on the other side of mechitza, it doesn't spread. Is loy tatzil that if you im hitzel b'meis hachomer like tatzil b'klei acheres hakal. How can it be that in a may he has a kal v'chomer? There it is effective. Here it isn't effective. So it sounds like, according to Rabbi Lezer, he doesn't believe in the svara of lav mina. So, and before we get to that, see how Rav fits in that. Omru lo the Chum disagrees with him. They said, "Lo, no. Im hitzel the meis chomer." You know why the mechitza text by meis chomer? Because it's common to have a room divided into two. To kei chalukah ba'oilin, it's very common to have a room divided into two. Staka we recognize as a separate room, and therefore it's not in the same oil. Mashenke tatzel beklecheres. You want it should also protect beklecheres hakal she'eichal goylin. You don't divide kalim. Interesting. Today's times when we have these air fryers where you have a split right in the middle and it's divides, maybe it's common to divide kalim today as well. But at least the Chacham say to him, the whole kavachayim is avgefrek. It's not a good kavachayim. It's not a good kavachayim because over there it makes sense to divide into two because it's a normal thing to do. Here, keli you don't divide in half. So Mela Gemara concludes this question. It's hard to understand how that fits in. How does the Rav fit in Rabbi Lezer when he says that even lav mina, even a mechitza, is effective? So you know what's the question? Rabbi Lezer kal v'chomer kamer. Rabbi Lezer agrees with the principle that lav mina is as if it's not there, but here he has a kal v'chomer from oil hameis. Different. So the Gemara, no, because if you believe the whole word of kal v'chomer, you can make say kal v'chomer by kachim and go as follows. Hasanami lebe kal v'chomer. Kachim mechali kachim madach. If you had in mind another carbon, you had in mind a carbon, and yet it ruins the original carbon. Chulin la kolshka, and you're not allowed to bring chulin to that zari. You're not allowed to bring chulin to the base of migdash. Chulin is much worse. So following that kal v'chomer, the chulin surely should ruin it. So Rabbi Lezer can't agree with the Rav if that's the svara of lav mina. So most of you right. At least according to Rabbi Lezer, don't do with the svara. No boss. At the time of the Rav Rabbi Lezer, Rav follows the view of Rabbi Lezer Segzeza Kosov. Nothing to do with the svara of lav mina. My time of the Rav. What's the svara of Rav? Not because what the Rav said because of a svara, but rather the pasuk says v'lo yechalu as kachim b'nei Yisrael. One place it says if you can ruin a carbon, and then another pasuk says that you will never be mechal kachim b'nei Yisrael. You can't ruin a carbon. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. How do we work it out? He says, Shir Hashem is so. This is how we learn. Kachim, mechal, and kachim. If you had in mind the wrong kachim because they're related to each other, but it's wrong, it ruins the carbon. But the ain't chulin, so by karma chatas, you had in mind the oil, it ruins it. But the ain't chulin, mechal, and kachim. It says v'lo yechal is kachim. Chulin cannot be mechal kachim. Alma, what do we see from here? Asakra, a pasuk comes along. So now I'm going to ask a question. What do you see from here? That even though we have l'chayda kal v'chomer, the reason why in our Gemaras, sorry?
Pasuk is always stronger than Svara.
Okay, 1 second. So what do we see from here? Rabbi Lezer Taka should hold a kal v'chomer by kachim as well. And what if he did it for chulin, it should ruin it. But because you have a pasuk v'lo yechal kachim Yisrael, it doesn't ruin it. Let's go back to Tumah. The whole board Rabbi Lezer is you have a kavachayim and madach by oil hames. It's a good divider, so surely by clay by tumah. But you have a pasuk toichay. If you tell me a pasuk can remove a kavachayim, the same thing you have here. So the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer doesn't use teicha for that purpose. He uses teicha for something else altogether, and therefore he has no pasuk to come and undermine the kavachayim. What does he use it for? I toichay mebay. Nobody uses it for toichay dafke. If the food is sitting inside the oven, laoichlin shegivlam betit. What about you have food inside the oven, not inside another keli, not toichay v'loy toichay. Doesn't that not? Toichay, that the food is inside the oven open. What happens if the food is inside the oven, but you put cement all around the food? Which means if you would touch it, it would never touch. It's impossible to touch the actual food. So now, is there a din of avid here? So the should give them that you food that you put into teeth. No, but he dashes. I say toichay v'loy toichay. What do you mean v'loy toichay? To teach you what? To teach you that toichay. I don't care what it is. I don't care what's inside. If it's toichay sitting inside the oven, even if it's covered in cement, it becomes tummy. Because I would have thought, oh, you'll be given tummy. Says you cannot touch it, but it does become tummy. That's what you use toichay for. But the Rabbanim come along and say that no, that we need toichay to tell you that dafke the beloy toichay to tell you there's inside another keli. Even if it's clay shetet, right? Even if it's not similar, it prevents the tumah from coming through. How do they know this? And that's what you take. How do they know this? But it's so obvious. If it's sitting inside the oven, just because you put cement around it, why should it be any different? I don't need a pasuk for that. It's automatically tummy. Taking further, Rabbi Yosef, but Ami, Rami. Now we'll continue with Rav because he continues making qualifications. The Mishnahs have open-ended dinim, and Rav comes along and says, "Oh, but it's chatzos loylishma. It means only if you had the shem oila, but if the shem chulin is mutter, so he's limiting it. So now it goes further. Rabbi Yosef, but Ami, Rami, Shini, Kodesh, Ashini, Bailan. There's two kinds of shini. You had in mind the wrong carbon, or you had in mind the wrong person. It's supposed to be a kapara for person A, for Reuven, and you had in mind Shimon. And they're both possible. So he asked a question as follows. Because Rav says one din by Shina Kodesh, what you had in mind, and a totally other din, Faked, by Shina Bailam. Mishani, mi Amar Rav, did Rav say, remember, Rav said that if you made a chatas l'shem oila, that's what the Mishnah means, that is possible. What happens if you made a chatas l'shem chatas? This chatas was brought to a person ate by mistake treifa fats. And the kohen who had in mind that the person ate dam, blood. So he had in mind the chatas, the same, but the wrong aveda. What happens then? Comes along and Rabbi says, chatas sheshachta l'shem chatas ksheda. It's kosher. Even though it's a wrong chatas, but because it's still a chatas, the animal is kosher. Even though the guy is not yotzes kapara, he has to be another carbon. But you continue with animals, not possible, not like the Mishnah says possible. L'shem oila psula. So now, Rav is cutting it down from both ends. First, he tells us the Mishnah says chatas by chatas is possible if you had l'lishma. Come along, Rav says, but if you had in mind chulin, don't worry about it. If you had in mind another chatas, don't worry about it. It's only if you had in mind the wrong carbon, but it has to be a carbon, but the wrong one. So he's limiting it from both ends. Anyway, so he says over here, seems from here like a pukvaket swara. Okay, we moved the swara before. See now the swara changed completely, and that is that when it comes to here, if it's mina, it doesn't impact it. You had in mind another chatas, but the wrong one doesn't impact it. If it's a loy mina, you had in mind an oila, then it impacts it. It's exactly the opposite we said before. However, before we consider the oila as if it's mina, because compared to chulin, that's called mina. But now, if you compare it to a chatas, which is similar to the original carbon, the oila now lamina.
Before we said chulin versus kodshim, now we're saying within kodshim you have something.
Exactly, yeah. So with the kodshim, it's like a pufaket. Dadafke, if it's mina, but it's wrong, that's not a problem. If it's loy mina, you had an oil, that's a problem. Which is a faket the sweater we had before. But we slugged up the sweater before because we said it's like there's a kasif. But that's what Rav says now over here. So the Gemara says it seems from here, Alma the ban mina machiba, that the lav mina loy machiba. Sorry, I skipped one. Alma, I skipped two lines. Alma, the lav mina machriba, oila ruins it. But the mina, you had in mind another chatas, loy machriba. That's when it comes to shinu kodesh. When it comes to shinu bailim, it's pumfaket. What do you mean pumfaket? Rav said chatas sheshach You shechted the chatas. If you shechted the chatas, al misha mechuyev chatas. If you shechted the chatas for somebody else who's chayiv the same chatas, but it's a different person, that's mina.
But the wrong Bible.
But yeah, sula. The mina is possible. Al misha mechuyev oila. If you had in mind a loy mina, somebody's chayiv an oila, shayda. When it comes to the carbon, you had the wrong carbon in mind. So we said if you had another chatas in mind, that's good, all good. But if you had an oil in mind, something else, that ruins it. When it comes to the bailim, we say kufaket. If you had in mind a bailim who's chayv achatas with the wrong one, you ruin it. If you had in mind a guy is chayv an oil, it doesn't ruin it. How can you? What's going on here? That's his question. Umeshani answers, there's a custom again. What I cannot compare shinu kodesh to shinu bailim. Possum over there, when it comes to an animal, you have the wrong animal in mind. It says v'shachat oisa lichatas amarachmana. You shechted for a chatas, right? When it comes, you have to make sure you shechted a chatas. What he did, he shechted. It's the wrong avera. It was supposed to be for treifa fats. He did it for blood, but nevertheless, you shechted for a chatas, so the animal is kosher. But the animal is kosher. Just the guy who has to bring another animal for his kapara. Over here, when it comes to having in mind the person, it says the chipet all love. It says he should have in mind all love. I mean on him and not what, and not someone similar to him. All love, not someone similar to him. Another person who's chayiv achatas. You had in mind the wrong person. That's a problem. Do me today. So it has to be someone that is similar to him. But if you had in mind someone who's chayiv an oila, that doesn't matter. So it's all psukim, not svar. He asked the question, Shinui Bailim. He did not ask from Shinui Kodesh or Shinui Bailim. He just asked from Shinui Bailim to the same question I had before from Tuma. Shinui Bailim, the same thing. You're saying Shinui Bailim, if it's similar, then it ruins it. And if it's not similar, in other words, a person who's chayiv a carbon oil, for example, and you had him in mind, it doesn't affect at all. Same what we said before, like Robert thought before. The mina is a problem. Mina is a problem, but loy mina is not a problem. So we're gonna ask the same question by Tuma. So we ask a question, and the same question he asked from over there. We say that even klei shetev, even kelim which are not klei chedes, obstructs the tumah from entering it. Uchedes lav mina. Before we answered that klei shetev is considered mina, right? It's only a mechitza that's lav mina. But let's see what he answers there. Umeshani answers. Mi Amar Rav. Did Rav say that chatas sheshachta al mishim mechuyev chatas? If you shechted the chatas of somebody else who's chayiv chatas, then it's possible because it's similar. But al mishim mechuyev oila. But if you shechted of someone who's chayiv an oila, which is dissimilar, in other words, alma, then mina machriba. If they're similar, it ruins it. And lav mina loy machriba. If it's not similar, it doesn't ruin it. But Tanya, didn't we learn? Even a clay shetev. Clay shetev means kalim that you can wash. Metal kalim, these kind of kalims. If there's food inside it, sitting inside the oven, and the walls of the keli are sticking out of the oven, so there's no avir, just you have to go through the keli. Matzah protects it. And yet it's holding back the tumah. And according to l'chayr, your word, if it's loymina, it's outside the realm. It doesn't have any bearing at all. Umeshani, and he answers as follows. 4 times we have the word toich. What do you mean 4 times? It says in the pasuk, any klicheres that falls inside there, it says this, Yipol mehem el toichoi, and then it says kol asher betoichoi becomes tameh. So it says twice the word toichoi. In both occasions, it could have said toich. So you have 2 toichs and 2 toichos. So you have 4 times the word toich. What do you need 4 times? So toich, toichoi, toich, toichoi. So chad, one of them you need pasha legufe. So how do you know everything else becomes tameh by touching? How do you know that the sheretz is hanging in the air? All the food that's sitting inside that keli becomes tameh. From the word toich, it's inside, so you need it for itself. That's toich. The chad one you need it for gzeidah just like it metame the food, it's also metame the keli. The keli sitting inside the oven and there's a sheretz suspended. The keli, or not sheretz, the oven is tameh. The keli thing inside the keli itself becomes tameh. Then we have and to tell you that only inside the oven. But if it's sitting inside another one, let's say klei shetev, does that become tamei? Either toichai. In other words, the klei shetev does not become tamei unless you never tell like this. This din of toicha, you would have thought once you've established that by klei cheres, just hanging in the air, the sheretz, everything becomes tamei. Maybe the rule applies to every keli. Even a metal keli, a sheretz is hanging in the air, all the food inside becomes tummy. Therefore, it says, no, an extra toich to tell you only inside the klecheres do we say that if it's suspended, the avir is metame. But in any other keli, the avir is not metame. That's number 3. And number 4, if this other keli is sitting inside an oven with the wall sticking out, and there's food inside the inner keli, is only toichay, only what's inside the oven itself, but loy toich, and that's what's inside another keli that's sitting in the oven. I feel a klei of matzah. Even a klei we have a pasuk for it. That ends this inyan. Tomorrow we start talking about Lishma.